I have very recently seen early data from a clinical trial with a coronavirus vaccine. And these data made me feel even more confident that we will be able to deliver a few 100 million doses of vaccine by the end of 2020.
We will deliver, by the end of this year, a vaccine at scale to treat the American people and our partners abroad.
Do you mean a fully approved vaccine for everyone, the full public, or a partially approved vaccine with emergency use?
No, we're looking for a full vaccine for everyone that wants to get it. Not everybody's going to want to get it. But we're looking at a full vaccine. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, Will.
Please.
Yes. So the answer is yes. We're working for a fully approved vaccine, but we'll also use the tools we have, for instance, emergency use authorization as appropriate. We use all of our regulatory tools to bring vaccine available for the entire American population by January.
We all want this to be true, right? This would be amazing. It would feel like a miracle. Is it possible?
Well, I think that is the point. I mean, we all want this. This makes this an incredibly, I think, tough story to cover in some ways. And I'm so curious to see what Peter Hotez thinks, obviously, because he works on these vaccines. But this doesn't fit with any timeline that we've ever heard before with regard to vaccines. Typically you're talking about many years, not many months with something like this. You clearly are hearing from some very impressive individuals who have a long history of vaccine development. منصف السلاوي, who has been at a company that was responsible for making 10 vaccines. We were just sort of looking some of this up even as he was speaking. The timeline on these vaccines, though, several years typically from actual development all the way through FDA approval. So the idea now that we're talking by the end of the year, and Caitlin Collins asked this question, by the end of the year, a possibly fully approved vaccine, not just one that has an emergency use authorization that's for healthcare workers, but a fully approved vaccine. That is the fastest timeline that we have heard, period, in this discussion. I will point out, if you watch the group at the stage at that point, you saw people clapping when منصف said that, including Dr. Fauci, clapping that there could be a fully approved vaccine by the end of the year. So again, obviously something that everybody wants, but I think our job is to ask questions and have appropriate amount of skepticism about that, just given that it's never been done. The types of platforms that we're talking about, and again, no one knows this better than Peter Hotez, some of these platforms have never been done before. The type of early data that I'm pretty sure منصف was talking about, Dr. Sluhi, was related to the Moderna messenger RNA platform. So instead of actually using virus to make a vaccine, you're actually using a blueprint of a part of the virus. You're putting that into the body, and then the body basically makes a lot of that blueprint and creates the antibodies that way. Hasn't been done before. Intriguing idea. They had a head start because of SARS and MERS, so they could be further along. But by the end of the year, that would be fantastic if it happens. But boy, it raises a lot of questions.
And Dr. Hotez, you're working on a vaccine. What do you think about the possibility of this?
Yeah, it was a very interesting press event. Look, I think it's really important to differentiate when we might have some vaccines manufactured, or as Dr. Fauci says, manufactured at risk, meaning we don't know if the vaccines are going to work, but we'll have to scale up manufacture, versus actually having a vaccine that we know actually works and is safe. So when we heard, for instance, about the first vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, that was in reference to having doses manufactured. I think that's potentially believable. The problem is, the White House continually couches the whole vaccine issue in manufacturing terms. They use the same language that they would use for ventilators or for diagnostic kits, that it's a manufacturing problem. There are manufacturing issues, certainly, but overwhelmingly it's to be able to test that the vaccine is both safe and effective. And as far as I understand, phase 3 clinical trials on the first vaccine, the Moderna one, won't even begin till the end of the summer. Others will follow. It will take at least a year, maybe longer, to get a sufficient amount of efficacy data, that is, data to show that it actually works, and safety data to know that it's safe. I don't see a path by which any vaccine is licensed whether it's emergency use or otherwise, until the third quarter of 2021. So I understand that it could be manufactured several vaccines could be manufactured by the end of the year. I just don't see how you collect enough safety and efficacy data to say that we can have a vaccine for general use by the end of the year. Potentially, it could, we'll continue phase 3 trials, expanded phase 3 trials for specific populations, such as healthcare providers and others, by the end of the year, but not of a fully licensed vaccine. I don't understand how that happens.
Sanjay, I know you may have some specific questions for Dr. Hotez that we may, as lay people, not be thinking of. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, Dr. Hotez, so they're talking about these different types of vaccines. We typically think of giving a little piece of the virus to somebody. That's what actually stimulates the antibody response inside the body. With these, I guess, messenger RNA vaccines, it's a totally different thing. I hear the language and the optimism changing around this over the last couple of months, maybe even with yourself, because I know that when you and I've talked, you've said this is typically a years-long process. And now even Dr. Fauci, he was applauding the idea that by the end of the year. Has something changed? Have we learned something new over the last several weeks that has created this new level of optimism? Or is this just the pressure to try and get this done? Is there something scientifically that has made a difference here?
Not that I know about scientifically. I mean, remember how this works. The actual science to make a vaccine against COVID-19 is not that complicated. If you've ever looked at what a cartoon of the coronavirus looks like, it looks like a donut with a piece of RNA stuffed in as the creamy filling, and then you've got a bunch of spikes emanating all around it. And those spikes are what dock with the host receptor in our tissues. So it's all about creating an immune response against the spike protein. That's how our vaccine works. That's how all the other vaccine works. The question's going to be, the vaccines that work well in laboratory animals may or may not be the best vaccines for humans, and you don't know till you do the clinical testing. So we're using a recombinant protein vaccine approach that's the same as the hepatitis B vaccine approach. Others are using inactivated virus or virus vectored vaccines or RNA or DNA vaccines. And I think it's great that all these new technologies are going to be used to see which of them creates an immune response against the spike protein. And they're all moving through clinical trials, and having all those extra shots on goal, no question, will accelerate the timeline. Also, this idea of manufacturing at risk, making lots of these different vaccines ready to go by the end of the year, that will also accelerate the timeline. The one thing that's really, I don't see a way you compress that, is to collect all of the data that you need to the FDA and CBER, and we heard Peter Marks at CBER is going to be helping to head that. He's a very seasoned guy when it comes to vaccines, as is منصف السلاوي, both excellent scientists. I don't see how we have enough data in hand as we go through the clinical trials to have it out by the end of the year. That would, let's say it's ready by the third quarter of 2021. That would break all records as is by a couple of years. But I think that's the very confusing part about all of this. So a lot of the language that you're hearing seems to be around scale-up manufacture, and I think that can be clarified a little bit better. But to have a vaccine that works and is safe, I don't see a path by which it can happen that quickly within the year 2020.
And Elizabeth, I suspect, as you've been talking to a lot of people involved in the search for the vaccine, that the consensus opinion is the one we just heard from Dr. Hotez.
Yes, for sure, Brianna. And I think in these situations, it's so important to look at exactly what someone has said. So when we look at what Dr. Slaoui said, he didn't say we'll have a vaccine on the market by the end of this year. He said that he is confident that we'll be able to deliver a few 100 million doses by the end of the year. As Dr. Hotez just pointed out, those are two different things. You can manufacture, and you'll have them. The doses will be sitting there ready to use, but will you have tested it thoroughly enough to know that it is safe and effective? There is a difference between having doses ready to go and being able to actually vaccinate the American public. I was listening to see if Dr. Slaoui would say, by the end of the year, we can start a vaccination program in the United States, vaccinate people who want to get vaccinated. That is not what he said, and I think that's super important that we pay attention to his exact words.